My name is Henry Collins. For over a decade, I poured every ounce of myself into building my son's company. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, even my wife's last days, all to ensure Trevor had a legacy. And one afternoon, with eyes colder than winter rain, he looked at me and said, "Dad, you're fired. No warning, no mercy, just betrayal wrapped in a tailored suit." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I walked out with a storm brewing in my chest because I knew something he didn't. Hidden behind a gaudy painting in his office was a report the kind that ruins lives, and I wasn't going to let mine be the only one destroyed. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and how old are you? Don't forget to subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked so you never miss a story like this again. Dad, get out. You're fired. That's what my only son, said to me after I dedicated 11 years of my life to building his dream. Trevor didn't just inherit Bright Path Solutions. He inherited the sweat from my pores, the late nights I spent drafting proposals while his mother slept alone, the weekends I sacrificed to fix contracts, and the holidays I missed while chasing clients. I built that company brick by digital brick, and now he stood across the conference room, eyes like ice chips, cutting me out like I was dead weight. The boardroom fell silent. Chairs squeaked. Colleagues I'd mentored sat frozen, avoiding eye contact, like I was some contagious disease. I looked around at the faces, some I hired right out of college. They couldn't even meet my eyes. Lisa leaned back, one arm draped over her chair like a queen surveying a broken knight. "Henry, your audits are holding us back," she said, smooth as silk but sharp as glass. I could see it in her smirk. This wasn't just Trevor's decision. It was hers too. They'd planned this. Together. My folder trembled in my hand. Inside were notes for the upcoming investor review, cash flow forecasts, and the budget I stayed up revising the night before. Trevor had no clue what half of it even meant. I wanted to say that. I wanted to scream. But instead I stood. The scrape of my chair against the polished floor echoed like a final nail in my coffin. "Fired," I repeated quietly, my voice dry as ash. "You forget who built this company." Trevor sneered and tossed my folder onto the table. Pages fluttered everywhere like broken wings. "Progress doesn't care about your sacrifices, old man," he said. Lisa nodded with a smug look, twisting the dagger a little deeper. I turned and walked out, deliberate, not defeated. The glass walls of the office reflected my silhouette like a ghost, watching the world I had built turn its back on me. Outside the conference room, no one spoke. No one dared. My office door was left ajar. I stepped in slowly, like returning to a church that no longer welcomed me. Ellen's photo sat on the desk, her smile frozen in time, her eyes saying everything the others wouldn't. I slipped her picture into my coat pocket, leaving behind plaques for Outstanding Leadership and Innovator of the Year. All meaningless now. On my way out, something caught my eye, a folder on Lisa's desk, marked Confidential. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. My mind already spun back to a moment 2 months ago when Trevor had slammed a report into his safe behind that god-awful painting. A report he didn't want me to see. Numbers. Fraudulent numbers. My stomach clenched. I walked past Lisa's desk and into the elevator. As the doors closed, I whispered to myself, "Thursday will be fun." Before we move on, let me ask you, have you ever been blindsided by someone you loved, someone you sacrificed everything for? Let me know in the comments. Want to see how I turn this betrayal into justice? Keep watching. I drove through the rain in silence, my fingers clenched around the steering wheel, like it was the last piece of stability I had left. The city blurred past my window, a smear of wet lights and long memories. I didn't head straight home. Instead, I found myself circling the lake where Ellen and I used to walk on Sunday mornings before Trevor was born. Back when life was simpler, quieter, kinder. I parked by the water and just sat there listening to the rain tap the roof like a ticking clock, counting down something I hadn't named yet. My thoughts drifted to the safe. I remembered the way Trevor had shoved the report inside his hands were shaking that day. He'd caught me glancing over a file on his desk, something that didn't add up. When I asked about it, he changed the subject too quickly. That's when I knew. There were numbers he didn't want me to see. And now those numbers would be my answer. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical. I got home late. The porch light flickered as I stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and memory. I tossed my soaked coat on the hook and sat at the kitchen table where Ellen and I used to drink coffee, plan our future, and argue over little things that don't matter anymore. I pulled out her photo, the same one I'd taken from the office. Her smile held steady like she knew I needed it. I touched the edges of the frame and whispered, "I'm not done yet, Elle." Then I remembered something, the key. I'd told Mike at security that I threw it away, but that was a lie. I had slipped it into my coat pocket before leaving the building. I went to the bedroom and emptied every drawer until I found it buried beneath an old scarf of Ellen's. The brass was cold and rusted, but it still carried the tag with the company's old logo. I stared at it like it might speak. My mind raced. If I wanted to bring Trevor down, I'd need help. Not revenge out of rage, but justice done right. I opened a dusty box of contacts from my early business days. A lawyer named Tom, who once owed me a favor. A reporter named Mark, who never sold out. I scribbled their names on a notepad and sat back staring at the ceiling as if it might give me courage. My phone buzzed. It was late, but I dialed Tom anyway. Henry, his voice was rough with sleep. "You okay? I'm fine, I lied. But I need advice, financial, urgent." A pause. This about Trevor. I didn't answer, but the silence said enough. "Be careful," he said slowly. "He's not the kid you raised." No, he wasn't. And I wasn't the man who would take this lying down. I hung up and sat in the dark kitchen with Ellen's photo watching me from the table like she was waiting for my next move. I looked back at her and whispered, "Thursday night." I take it all back. Before we go on, I want to know if you were in my shoes. Would you risk everything to reveal the truth, even if it meant going up against your own blood? Let me know in the comments. Thursday came like a storm in my chest, quiet but brewing with pressure. By day, I played the part of a retired man, coffee at the diner, nods to neighbors, small talk at the grocery store. But inside, my thoughts were sharp and calculating. I spent the morning at the kitchen table, a plain man with a plan no one could see. Ellen's photo stayed propped near my coffee mug, her steady gaze pushing me forward. The plan was simple but dangerous. The back entrance to Bright Path still used manual locks. No retina scanners, no fancy codes, just a key. My key. That alone told me how confident Trevor was. Or how careless. At midnight, I drove with headlights off until I reached the alley behind the building. The rain had stopped, but the ground still glistened, reflecting the glow of the exit sign flickering over the back door. I stepped out, pocketed the key, and paused. One last breath. The lock turned with a reluctant groan, the metal resisting like it knew what I was about to do. The hinges squeaked as I pushed the door open, the sound far too loud in the silence. I slipped inside. Every step down that corridor felt like walking through my own memory. Every wall I helped repaint, every hallway I walked late at night, while my son slept, unaware his future was being written in spreadsheets and sacrifice. I knew the blind spots in the camera system. I designed them, ironically, to protect from external threats. Turns out the enemy was already inside. Trevor's office was still at the end of the hall, same polished wood door, same smug nameplate. I opened it slowly. His cologne lingered in the air, sharp, synthetic, overconfident. The abstract painting hung above the desk, like a joke only he thought was funny. I pulled it down and set it against the wall. Behind it, the safe. The numbers on the dial gleamed under the low office light. I tried his birthday, my first guess, and to my surprise, it worked. That said everything I needed to know. He thought no one would ever come for what was inside. Inside the safe sat a thin folder. I pulled it out with slow hands, careful not to leave fingerprints. The papers inside were worse than I expected. Fake invoices, money routed to offshore accounts, ghost vendors that didn't exist. And Lisa's signature was on every single page. My jaw tightened. Trevor was the front man, but she was the puppeteer. I felt sick, but I kept reading. At the bottom was a photo Trevor and Lisa on a yacht, champagne in hand, while I was spending New Year's alone at a hospital watching over Ellen. I tucked everything into my jacket. Just then I heard footsteps. Heavy, close. A flashlight beam sliced through the hallway. I ducked under the desk, my knees hitting the carpet hard. The door creaked open. The guard stepped inside, sweeping the room lazily with his light. All clear, he muttered into his radio. I didn't breathe until I heard the door click shut again. Ellen's photo pressed against my chest inside my coat. I whispered, "This is for you." I slipped out, hugging the folder close, and vanished into the night. Tell me, if your legacy was stolen by your own blood, would you take it back even if it meant becoming a stranger in the process? I got home just before 3 in the morning. The house was dark except for the porch light I'd forgotten to turn off, casting long shadows through the living room. I locked the door behind me and dropped my coat over the chair, the weight of the report still heavy in the inside pocket. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with Ellen's photo beside me, a chipped mug of black coffee in my hand, and the stolen report spread out like a war map. Each page was another blade, sham invoices, inflated numbers, hidden transfers. Trevor had gutted the company from the inside while I was out there defending it with every ounce of integrity I had left. Lisa's name was everywhere. Her signature, her notes. She was the mind behind the mask. Trevor was just the son riding the train. I ran my fingers down the lines, tracing lies built on my labor. My chest ached with something I couldn't name, grief maybe, or rage dressed up as sorrow. I remembered what Ellen once told me during one of Trevor's teenage tantrums. "Don't yell," she'd said. "Be smarter, not louder." And that became the strategy. Not revenge in flames, but justice in focus. I went to the closet in the bedroom and pulled out my old safe. It was a small box, fireproof, nothing special. I placed the original documents inside and locked it tight. I'd make a copy for what came next. I fired up my old printer, its hum filling the quiet room, like an old friend who knew better than to speak. The ink bled the truth, one page at a time. When it was done, I slipped the copy into a plain manila envelope and sealed it. Next, I opened my laptop, logged into a private cloud I hadn't used since Ellen passed, and uploaded everything. If something happened to me, at least the story wouldn't die with me. I scribbled down a timeline. A strategy reporter, first lawyer, second. If Trevor tried to spin this, I'd be ready. At 6, I took a shower, shaved, dressed like it was any other day. Then I drove to a quiet corner cafe downtown, the kind with creaky chairs and the smell of burnt espresso in the air. Mark was already there, sitting in the back booth, notebook, in hand, eyes sharp behind tired glasses. "This better be good, Henry," he said as I sat down. I slid the envelope across the table. No names. just facts. Read it first. He opened it, skimmed, and his expression darkened. Jesus, he muttered. Bright Path is done if this is real. It's real, I said flatly. I need a week to verify, he replied. I'll be in touch. I left the cafe without looking back. On the sidewalk, Chicago's wind slapped my face, but for the first time since the betrayal, I felt alive. Before we move forward, I want to ask, when truth becomes your only weapon, would you risk everything, even your own name, to use it? I barely made it home before the first tremor hit. My phone buzzed just as I locked the front door behind me. It was a message from an unknown number. You made a mistake. No punctuation. No name. Just 5 words that hit harder than any slap. I stood frozen in the hallway, the phone still glowing in my hand, its silence louder than any siren. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They knew what I had done, and now I knew they were watching. I placed the copy of the report under a newspaper on the kitchen counter, then walked the house, slowly checking windows, listening for sounds that didn't belong. It was quiet, too quiet. I sat down with Ellen's old book in hand, the one she used to read on the porch when we were young. I flipped through the pages until I reached the one I hollowed out months ago, a hiding place. I slipped the original report inside and closed the cover. If they came for me, they wouldn't find it easily. Then I waited. My mind didn't race anymore. It moved with cold clarity. At 10 the next morning, I met Mark again, this time in a different cafe. He arrived looking over his shoulder, his usual swagger dulled. "This is bigger than just Trevor," he said as he slid into the booth. "Lisa's name is tied to 3 dummy firms and a real estate holding in the Cayman Islands. Your report cracked it wide open." He looked at me, eyes serious. "Are you ready for what's coming?" "I was born ready," I replied, not out of confidence, but out of necessity. I handed him a flash drive with more files, spreadsheets I had quietly saved over the last 6 months. Things that didn't sit right, but I never had time to confront. Mark nodded. "Give me a few days. When this hits, it'll burn." I left the cafe into a wind that smelled like change. Back at Bright Path's corporate tower, chaos had already begun. I wasn't there, but I could picture it clearly. Trevor pacing behind his desk, Lisa on her phone, panic in every glance. And they were right to panic. That safe they thought was secure empty. That secret they buried dug up. And the man they called irrelevant more dangerous than ever. My phone buzzed again that night. A second message. "This will cost you." I stared at the screen, then deleted it. They still thought this was a negotiation. It wasn't. This was the beginning of their reckoning. That evening, I took a long walk around the block. The leaves were starting to fall, crunching under my boots with every step. The air was cold, but I didn't mind. I passed neighbors, nodded politely. No one had any idea that I was holding the match to a corporate explosion. But I did. And Ellen did. Her photo stayed in my wallet close to my heart, reminding me what I was fighting for. Not money, not pride, but the truth, the dignity they tried to erase. Before we turn the page, let me ask, when someone tries to erase your legacy, do you stay silent, or do you write your story louder? It started with whispers. Bright Path's headquarters hadn't even opened for the day, and already the rumor mill was grinding hard. Trevor's assistant sent out a cryptic email canceling the executive roundtable. Lisa didn't show up to the morning debrief, and someone spotted a reporter lingering near the front steps, notepad in hand, pretending to check his phone. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. I knew the anatomy of panic. I had built this company with discipline, structure, and transparency. Trevor and Lisa built it with smoke and mirrors. And now that the smoke was clearing, they had nowhere left to hide. I sat in my den, coffee growing cold in my hand, watching the news ticker crawl across the bottom of the screen. Bright Path Financials under investigation. Sources say fraud allegations could be explosive. I didn't flinch. I just turned up the volume. The anchors spoke cautiously, no names yet, but I recognized the tone. It was the sound of a storm forming. I had lived through enough to know when pressure was building. Across the city, Trevor's world was cracking. Lisa slammed her phone on the glass conference table hard enough to spiderweb the screen. "My contacts are getting spooked," she hissed. "Reporters are circling. Somebody talked. You said the file was secure?" Trevor snapped, his voice thin, high-pitched. "You swore no one could get to it." "I did my part," Lisa fired back, her eyes narrowing. "But maybe your old man wasn't as clueless as you thought." That stopped him cold. In that instant, he saw it. The safe had been opened. His father, his fossil, as he once called me, had reached into the heart of their scheme and pulled out its spine. He lunged toward the wall and yanked open the safe. Nothing, just cold air and shame. I imagined his face, then confusion curdling into fear, and it felt justified. Meanwhile, I was at home reviewing my notes, cross-checking every number with the timeline. I didn't need more proof, but I wanted to be thorough. If they tried to spin this as a misunderstanding, I would bury them with precision. My phone buzzed. A new message from Mark. "Your copy's been verified. The paper wants to go live in 48 hours. You ready for this?" I stared at the screen for a long second before replying, "Do it." Then I powered down the phone, took a deep breath, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't gloating. I was preparing. Because once the story broke, there'd be no going back. They would come for me through lawyers, threats, maybe worse. But I had already accepted that. This was never about revenge. It was about redemption. For the years I gave up, for the wife I buried, for the dignity they tried to shred. Before we continue, I want to ask you, what would justice look like to you if the very people you built your life around decided you no longer mattered? The storm didn't wait 48 hours. By the next morning, it was front-page news. Bright Paths, hidden debt, fake vendors, and offshore shell games. The headline read. Beneath it, two photos, one of Trevor shaking hands with a senator, and one of Lisa grinning at a charity gala. The contrast was sickening. I read the article slowly, letting each paragraph soak in like rain through dry earth. Mark hadn't held back. Every detail I gave him was there, backed up, cross-referenced, and brutal. He called it corporate betrayal in its most personal form. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, but I wasn't ashamed either. The article laid out the whole scheme: how fake companies were used to siphon funds, how client invoices were inflated to pocket differences, how Lisa's name appeared on transactions masked as vendor relations. The final section, my letter, a personal statement, anonymous but raw. The company you see today was not built on genius. It was built on sacrifice, mine. I gave my son a legacy, and he traded it for greed. That was my voice, quiet but clear. I didn't name names, but I didn't have to. Anyone who'd been watching the company knew. The fallout was instant. Shareholders pulled back. Board members demanded an emergency audit. Internal staff leaked more documents. The email server was frozen. Phones rang off the hook. And inside that glass tower Trevor loved so much, everything cracked. Lisa was the first to break. She showed up late, sunglasses on indoors, face pale. Trevor tried to control the narrative, calling the report a smear job, but his voice shook in every interview. Investors weren't buying it. The ones who had met me knew what kind of man I was, And suddenly, Trevor's polished charm looked more like polished deceit. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I didn't post on social media. I didn't grant interviews. I just waited. My lawyer Clara called that afternoon. We need to meet. I've gone through Ellen's letters again. There's enough in her handwriting to prove you co-founded Bright Path, at least informally. She wrote that I asked, surprised. Multiple times, Clara said. She mentioned your early funding, your late-night coding marathons, your original pitch deck. She even mentioned her fear that Trevor would one day forget. That stopped me cold. Ellen always saw things I didn't. I sat with that for a long moment, staring at the wood grain of my kitchen table, tracing it like it might anchor me. What do you want to do? Clara asked. File a formal claim to your share, Sue. Yes, I said the word, coming quieter than I expected. Not for the money, for the truth. Clara paused. Then we need to move fast, because Trevor will come at you hard. Let him, I said. I'm not hiding anymore. That night I opened Ellen's letters again. Her handwriting steadied me. Her words reminded me why I started this. It wasn't to ruin my son. It was to reclaim the part of me they erased. Before we move on, I want to ask if you had a chance to reclaim the life someone stole from you, but it meant confronting someone you once loved, would you take it? 2 days after the article broke, my phone rang just past midnight. I was sitting in the living room, the lights off, Ellen's old scarf draped across my shoulders like armor. The name on the screen froze me, Trevor. I stared at it for a moment, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Finally, I picked up. What do you want? I asked. His voice came low, clipped, full of venom. You know what I want? Don't play dumb. You're going to have to be more specific. I replied, calm as still water. You leaked that report, he hissed. You think I wouldn't recognize your handwriting in that statement? You think I wouldn't notice your little jabs in the numbers? I didn't deny it. Silence filled the line, heavy and electric. You betrayed me, he said, quieter now, like the weight of those words surprised him. No, I said you betrayed yourself. You just thought no one would ever hold you accountable. You don't know what this will cost. He growled. Lisa's hiring a private investigator. You're in over your head. I've lived through war, Trevor. You think I'm afraid of a PI with a clipboard? There was a pause and then the call ended. No goodbye. No breath. Just static and silence. I set the phone down and walked to the front window. The street outside was empty, but something in me knew this wasn't over. It had only just begun. I slept with one eye open that night. In the morning, Clara came over. She brought a thick folder, documents, timelines, Ellen's letters. She'd been busy. We sat at the kitchen table while she walked me through our legal plan. We'll file under fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and ownership misrepresentation. It won't just hit Trevor and Lisa financially. It'll hit them professionally, reputationally. Good, I said. But no smear campaigns. No public shouting matches. Let the facts do the damage. Clara nodded. We're filing tomorrow. Be ready. Once this enters the system, they'll know it's you. There's no going back. I was never going back, I said. That evening, I drove to the park. It was quiet, leaves dancing along the footpath, the scent of wood smoke in the air. I sat on a bench where Ellen and I used to sit on cool autumn days, where Trevor once rode his little red bike in crooked circles. The past felt so close, like it could reach out and touch my shoulder. I pulled out Ellen's photo and rested it on my knee. It's moving now, I whispered. Everything we built, everything he tried to erase, it's coming back into the light. A breeze rustled the trees, and I imagined her voice in it, steady and proud. That night, as I locked up the house, I checked every door, every window. The floorboards creaked under my feet. Somewhere in the dark, a shadow moved past the fence, quick, quiet, intentional. I turned off the porch light and stood still in the silence. If they wanted to come for me, I was ready. But they had no idea just how ready I truly was. Tell me if you knew danger was coming, but the truth depended on your courage. Would you still step forward? Or would you retreat into safety? The next morning, I walked into Clara's office carrying a briefcase I hadn't touched in years. It still smelled faintly of ink and leather and long nights drafting deals I thought would outlast me. The receptionist gave me a tight smile. She'd probably read the papers. Everyone had by now. Clara was waiting in her glass-walled office, already surrounded by boxes of evidence and Ellen's carefully preserved letters. She stood when I entered, eyes steady. "You sure about this?" she asked. "You can still walk away." I shook my head. "No more walking away." She nodded and slid a file across the table. "Sign here. We're officially filing suit against Bright Path Solutions, Trevor Collins and Lisa Wilson for fraud, misrepresentation, and wrongful expulsion of a founding partner." The pen felt heavier than it should have, but I signed, my name in black ink right beneath a line that might as well have read "Everything changes now." Clara leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "You know this won't be clean. They'll fight back. Hard." "So will I said. "And this time I won't be wearing a company badge. I'll be armed with the truth." That afternoon, the lawsuit hit the docket. Within hours, my phone started ringing, press, former colleagues, even old investors I hadn't heard from in years. I ignored every call. This wasn't about public applause. It was about accountability. Meanwhile, across the city, Trevor and Lisa sat in the Bright Path boardroom, staring at the legal documents that named them defendants. Lisa was the first to speak. "He actually filed," she muttered almost to herself. Trevor slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing against the glass. "I told you he was done. I told you he didn't have it in him." "Clearly you underestimated your father," Lisa snapped. "And now we have a real problem." "We'll settle," Trevor said. "Buy him off." "He won't take it," she replied flatly. "This isn't about money anymore." They both knew it, and for the first time since they fired me, I think they understood just how far I was willing to go. That night, as I reviewed the final draft of our court submission, I opened Ellen's old box again. Her letters, her handwriting, her presence. I traced the words she once wrote during our toughest years. "If they ever forget what you gave up for them, don't fight them with your fists. Fight them with facts." I whispered her name. "It's working, Elle. They can't bury me. Not anymore." As I placed the letters back in the box, the doorbell rang. 3 short knocks, not the postman, not a neighbor. I stood still for a moment, then tucked the box under the couch and walked to the door. I didn't open it. I just listened. After a few seconds of silence, I heard footsteps retreating and the crunch of tires over gravel. They were watching, trying to rattle me, but they were too late for that. I had already made peace with what I was about to do. "Let me ask you, when they come knocking with fear, would you answer with fear? Or with fire?" I showed up to the courthouse wearing the only suit Ellen ever said made me look like a man who couldn't be shaken. It was dark, navy tailored, just enough to hide how tired I'd become over the years. Clara walked beside me, a folder clutched tight in her hands. Inside were Ellen's letters, the financial records I had salvaged, and the case that would force my son to answer for everything he'd done. The building smelled like old carpet and legal ink. Reporters lined the hallway but kept their distance. I wasn't some fallen CEO seeking redemption. I was a father reclaiming what had been stolen by blood, by betrayal, by arrogance. When we entered the hearing room, Trevor was already there, sitting stiff beside Lisa. His face was pale eyes, puffy like he hadn't slept in days. Lisa looked thinner than I remembered her usual poise, replaced by something brittle. She didn't look at me. Trevor did. And in that look I saw the panic under the bravado, the boy behind the man who had once called me his hero. The judge entered commanding silence with nothing but presence. He reviewed the opening statements, then turned to us. "Mr. Collins," he said, looking directly at me, "present your claim." Clara stood calm and measured. "Your Honor, we present documented evidence of financial fraud, concealed income, and deliberate misrepresentation of company ownership. Furthermore, we submit personal correspondence from the late Ellen Collins, co-founder of Bright Path Solutions, confirming Mr. Henry Collins's foundational role in both the funding and formation of the company." She handed the letters to the bailiff. The room hushed. You could hear a paperclip drop. Trevor shifted in his chair. Lisa whispered something to him fast and sharp. The judge read Ellen's letters for a long moment. Then he looked at Trevor. "Do you have a response?" "He's lying," Trevor blurted. His voice cracked. "Those letters could have been faked. He's bitter. He wants to destroy what I built." The judge didn't blink. He turned back to Clara. "Have these letters been verified?" "Yes, Your Honor. Independent forensic analysis confirms both the ink age and Ellen Collins's signature. Additionally, we've included dated documents and email threads referencing these letters over the years." Trevor slumped. Lisa leaned back in her chair, jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. For the first time since this all began, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not triumph, just quiet, grounded certainty. When the hearing adjourned, I stepped into the hallway and was immediately swarmed by questions, flashing cameras, microphones in my face. I didn't answer a single one. I just walked forward. As I passed Trevor, he stopped me with a whisper. "You'll regret this." I turned to him, met his eyes without flinching. "You started this, son. I'm just finishing it." Then I kept walking, every step steady, every breath calm. The sky outside was gray and wet, but it didn't touch me. I had faced the storm and I was still standing. Let me ask you this. If your silence had become the very reason they thought they could erase you, would you finally speak? And let the whole world hear? The morning after the hearing, I sat alone at the park bench where Trevor once fed ducks with chubby fingers and wide eyes that used to light up when I came home. Now those eyes looked at me like I was an obstacle, not a father. The wind was sharp leaves scraping the pavement, echoing the coldness still lodged in my chest. I pulled Ellen's photo from my coat and stared at it for a long time. She would have been proud, but I knew she'd also be heartbroken. She wanted her son to be strong, not ruthless. But I wasn't here to rescue him from his choices. I was here to hold him accountable. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara Discovery begins next week. Get ready. I slid the phone back into my pocket and stood up. Across town, Trevor was unraveling. Inside Bright Path's once pristine glass tower, the mood had turned septic. Board members were bailing key clients, were pausing contracts, and staff were quietly cleaning out desks while pretending it was just spring cleaning. Lisa paced the executive floor like a cornered animal. "This is getting out of control," she snapped into her phone, her heels stabbing the floor with each step. "I don't care how. I want leverage. Now." Her contact on the other end was Vaughn, a private investigator with a reputation for skirting the law if the price was right. "Start with Henry Collins," she said coldly. "Dig into his life, his finances, everything." Trevor listened from the corner, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. He hadn't spoken since the hearing. He was spiraling, but didn't want her to see it. Later that evening, a black SUV parked across from my house. It didn't move. No one got out. I watched from the window without flinching. I knew they were trying to intimidate me. They didn't realize that fear had left me the moment I was fired. At dinner, I barely touched my food. My appetite had shriveled into discipline. I went into the study and pulled out a weathered file labeled 1998 Initial Funding. It contained bank statements, contracts, photos from the early days, proof that Bright Path didn't exist until I made it real. If Lisa wanted leverage, she'd have to fabricate it. But I had truth, and the truth ages well. That night I spoke to Clara again. She confirmed subpoenas were going out, bank records, emails, internal documents. Lisa's going to crack, she said. She's not built for long fights. But Trevor, he might try something desperate. Let him, I said. I've got nothing left to lose. She hesitated. You do. Your legacy, your peace. I paused. No. I lost peace the day he threw me out of that boardroom like I was nothing. I'm not chasing calm anymore, Clara. I'm chasing closure. After the call, I walked out onto the porch. The SUV was gone, just a trail of tire marks in the gravel. But I knew they'd be back. They always come back when they realize the quiet ones are the ones who carry the sharpest truth. Let me ask you, when people who once underestimated you finally see what you're capable of, do you hold back? Or do you let them choke on their own arrogance? By the end of that week, the media coverage shifted from cautious to relentless. Local outlets gave way to national interest. The Wall Street Journal requested comment. CNN wanted an interview. I declined them all. My silence was intentional, not passive. I didn't need to defend my story. I had built it one fact at a time. Instead, I focused on preparation. Clara and I met every morning, combing through discovery materials, connecting dots, highlighting inconsistencies in Trevor's internal emails and Lisa's expense records. Patterns began to emerge. Payments made to non-existent vendors, money wired to foreign entities just hours after investor deposits. It was a house of cards, and I had just lit the match. Across town, Trevor was breaking in ways he didn't even recognize. His voice cracked during a board call. Lisa snapped at him in front of a junior associate. Their once polished partnership had started to rot from the inside. She blamed him for underestimating me. He blamed her for not covering their tracks. They were unraveling like cheap thread. But they still had claws. That Friday evening, I received a letter, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a thin threat wrapped in legalese, a cease and desist order accusing me of defamation, intellectual property theft, and breach of contract. I read it once, then again, then laughed. Quietly. Not out of mockery, but out of recognition. They were scared. This wasn't strategy, it was desperation disguised in formal language. I handed the envelope to Clara the next morning. She skimmed it and rolled her eyes. They're throwing paper at a fire. You're covered. Every document we've submitted has time-stamped backups, third-party verification, and chain of custody records. Let them swing. They'll only wear themselves out. I nodded. But something inside me still twisted, not fear, not guilt, but disappointment. I'd raised Trevor to be better than this, to use his mind for growth, not destruction. I thought about a time when he was 13 and broke a neighbor's window with a baseball. He came home shaking, scared of what I'd say, but I didn't yell. I took him by the hand, walked him to the neighbor's house, made him apologize and pay for the repairs. I told him owning your mistakes doesn't make you weak. It makes you worthy of trust. Somewhere along the way, he unlearned that. Or maybe he never believed it to begin with. That night, I sat in the garage flipping through old photo albums. Ellen had labeled everything with tiny notes in the corners. Trevor's first day at Bright Path, he brought donuts. Trevor presenting the annual report, so nervous, but nailed it. Trevor hugging Henry after the new client deal, July 2015. I stared at that last one for a long time. We looked happy, whole, honest. It hurt more than the betrayal itself, knowing those moments once existed. But I closed the album not because I was angry, but because I was ready. The past would not protect him from the consequences of the present. Let me ask you, when memories of better times cloud your judgment, do you forgive what someone's become? Or do you honor who you once were by standing firm? The lawsuit moved forward faster than I expected. Discovery unearthed more than we anticipated files Lisa thought she had scrubbed internal chats between her and Trevor, full of arrogance and contempt audio recordings from a compliance meeting where they openly mocked regulations. Clara sent me the transcript. I read every word. It wasn't just fraud. It was betrayal dressed in entitlement. He won't do anything. He's too sentimental, Lisa had said. He'll walk away like he always does. And Trevor responded, let him. The company's mine now. He's just a name in the footnotes. That one hit deep. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed what I already knew. I was never meant to be honored in their story. I was meant to be erased. I closed the file and stepped outside. The autumn air was crisp, the wind moving through the trees like whispers. I stood still for a long while, then reached into my pocket and pulled out a faded photo of Ellen holding Trevor as a baby. She looked exhausted and radiant. He looked like possibility. It reminded me that I once believed in him, not the man he became, but the boy who used to sneak into my study to help me type. I tucked the photo away and walked back inside. Later that afternoon, Clara called. There's an offer, she said, from their legal team. Settlement. No admission of guilt, just money. How much? $7 million, she said. They want you to walk away. Drop your claim, disappear. I didn't even need to think about it. No, I said. Tell them the price is truth, and it's non-negotiable. Clara didn't argue. She knew this wasn't about dollars. This was about dignity. Meanwhile, Bright Path's internal world collapsed. Lisa tried to rally the board, but their trust had fractured. Investors filed independent complaints. Clients began canceling contracts. HR was flooded with anonymous whistleblower reports. Someone even leaked her Cayman Islands account activity. The fallout was inevitable, and they knew it. 2 nights later, Trevor called again. No threats this time, just silence on the line before he spoke. Let's meet. Where the park, he said. The one by the lake. Tomorrow. Noon. I didn't answer right away. Come alone, I said. If she's there, I walk, fine. Then he hung up. I stayed in my chair long after the call ended, staring at the photo on the mantel, me, Ellen, and Trevor, back when life was complicated in simpler ways. I wondered what she'd say. Would she ask me to meet him with compassion, or would she remind me that mercy without accountability is just enabling? The next morning, I ironed a clean shirt, polished my shoes, and drove in silence to the lake. The same one where I taught him how to skip rocks, how to tie a proper knot, how to look a man in the eye when telling the truth. I arrived 5 minutes early. Trevor was already sitting on the bench, alone, head down, hands fidgeting. The man who once fired me with a smirk now looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Let me ask you, if the person who betrayed you asked for a meeting, not to fight but to beg, would you listen? Or would you remind them why you stood up in the first place? He didn't look up right away when I approached. I sat beside him, leaving space between us wide enough to carry the silence. The lake was still the kind of quiet that makes people either tell the truth or fall apart. Trevor exhaled, slow and shaky. "Dad," he said finally, "I didn't think it would go this far." I kept my gaze on the water. "You fired me like I was a janitor who lost his keycard, and now you're surprised the truth came knocking." He rubbed his palms together, eyes glassy. "I made mistakes. I trusted Lisa too much. I thought I could control it." "No," I said, turning toward him. "You thought you were untouchable." He flinched. "I was trying to grow the company, make it global. You were slowing things down." I leaned in slightly. "What you call slowing down, I call accountability, structure, ethics. You replaced all of that with shortcuts and ego." He looked down at his shoes, scuffed and unfamiliar, like he didn't recognize the man wearing them. "What do you want Dad Money A title back?" I almost laughed, but it came out sadder than intended. "If you knew me at all, you'd never ask that." He hesitated. "Then what? Why are you doing this?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out one of Ellen's letters, unfolded it gently, and handed it to him. He took it with slow hands. His eyes scanned the words, his mother's words. She had written it during the second year of the company, the year Trevor graduated and joined full-time. Her handwriting was calm, round, thoughtful. "If Henry ever loses this company, it won't be because he wasn't worthy. It'll be because the people closest to him forgot what he gave up to build it." He stared at the page a long time before folding it again. "She really wrote that. She wrote a dozen like it," I said. "She saw this coming. Not the fraud, but the fracture." He wiped his eyes quickly. "I miss her." "So do I said quietly. "Every day. And that's why I can't let this go. Because everything we built together, her memory, her values, her belief in doing what's right, was buried under your ambition." He nodded, slow and almost imperceptible. "So what happens now?" "You tell the truth," I said. "In court. Under oath. Not because I need your apology, but because the people you lied to deserve more than a press statement. They deserve honesty." He looked at me, then really looked. The boy I raised flickered in his eyes, if only for a second, and after that he asked. I stood. "After that you start over. And maybe, just maybe, you learn how to build something without burning everyone who helped you." I walked away without looking back. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of leaves and the weight of history. "Before we continue, I want to ask, if someone who broke you finally admitted the truth, would that be enough? Or would justice still need to run its course?" The day of the deposition came without drama. No press, no photographers, just concrete walls, overhead lights, and the kind of silence only the law respects. I arrived early, dressed simply, carrying a single folder, Ellen's final letter, and a printed copy of the earliest funding transfer, both faded at the edges, but sharp where it mattered. Trevor entered 20 minutes later with his attorney, looking thinner, quieter, older. Lisa arrived last. Her usual confidence had curdled into stiffness. She didn't nod, didn't glance. Her heels no longer clicked. They dragged. Inside the room, the court reporter tapped keys in rhythm with truth being forced from shadows. Clara sat beside me, calm and prepared. "Swear to tell the truth," the clerk asked. Trevor's voice was dry. "I do." What followed wasn't explosive, it was surgical. Question after question peeled back their narrative. Clara didn't grandstand. She simply presented facts, documents, timelines. Lisa tried to deflect claimed ignorance. Clara smiled politely and produced internal emails signed by Lisa herself. Dates, amounts, instructions. Trevor remained mostly silent, his lawyer fielding objections, but the evidence was already speaking louder than both of them. Then came my turn. Mr. Collins, the opposing counsel, asked, "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I didn't hesitate. Because I believed in my son longer than I should have. Because I thought loyalty meant silence. And because it took being thrown out of what I built to finally see that I wasn't protecting him, I was enabling him. The lawyer blinked. "So this is personal, everything worth defending always is," I replied. Trevor didn't look up. Not once. After hours of testimony signatures and recordings, it ended with nothing more than a quiet, adjourned. But something in the air had shifted. The scales had started to balance. Outside the building, the air felt thinner. I stepped into the sun and exhaled for the first time in weeks. Clara joined me. "They know it's over," she said. "They'll try to settle again." "Let them," I said. "We're not done." That night, I placed Ellen's letter back into its envelope and tucked it into the box with the others. I lit a fire in the hearth and sat in my old chair. The one she used to tease me about said it made me look like a judge. I stared at the flames and let the silence settle. Not empty silence. Full silence. The kind that comes after you've told the truth and stopped apologizing for it. Later, I stood at the mantel and looked at our family photo again. I no longer felt anger, just clarity. He was still my son. But I had stopped waiting for him to become the man I hoped he'd be. I was becoming the man I forgot I was. Before we begin the next chapter, let me ask, when your voice finally breaks through the noise, do you rest? Or do you keep going until the truth echoes where lies once stood? The courthouse was different this time. The air felt charged, like it knew something permanent was about to happen. There were more reporters, more whispers, more faces pretending they weren't watching. I walked in, steady, unhurried. Clara beside me, briefcase in hand, spine straight, like she was carrying not just evidence, but principle. In the hallway, Trevor stood with his lawyer. He didn't speak. He didn't nod. He looked like a man who'd been awake too long, worn thin by the very machine he built to outpace me. Lisa wasn't there. We'd learned the day before she'd accepted a separate deal with prosecutors, immunity in exchange for full cooperation. It was only a matter of time. The courtroom was smaller than it looked on TV, no grand speeches, no thundering gavel. Just a judge with tired eyes and sharp ears. The trial lasted 2 days. Every piece of evidence laid out like a map, bank records, falsified contracts, forged approvals, and finally the letters from Ellen. Her words weren't emotional pleas. They were clarity on paper. Memories she recorded with care. Her voice spoke through every line. By the second afternoon, Trevor finally cracked. His attorney leaned over, whispering furiously, but it didn't matter. Trevor stood up during the closing arguments, his voice breaking, and said, "He's telling the truth. My father's telling the truth." The room froze. Even the judge paused. "I made those decisions," Trevor continued. "I signed off on the accounts. I let it all happen. And I fired the one person who warned me." He sat back down slowly. The judge said nothing right away. He just looked at him for a long moment, then turned to Clara. "Anything further, no, Your Honor," she said, her voice measured but heavy. "The facts have spoken." That night, the headlines spread across every major outlet. Trevor Collins admits to fraud in stunning courtroom confession. Reporters lined up for comments. I gave none. I went home instead. Back to the quiet, back to the walls that remembered who I really was long before anyone else did. I made a pot of coffee, pulled Ellen's box of letters from the shelf, and sat with her one last time. "It's over, love," I whispered. He finally said it. Not because I forced him to, but because he finally saw it. I didn't feel victory, just completion. A full circle. The company was mine again on paper, in truth, and in legacy, but I had no intention of rebuilding it. The fire was gone. What mattered now wasn't reclaiming the business. It was restoring what came before it. The man I was before ambition blurred everything. That evening, I met with Clara again. We discussed the final filings, the restitution arrangements, the asset transitions. "What do you want to do with Bright Path?" she asked. I looked out the window at the fading sun. "I want to give it away. To who? To those who'll never take it for granted: charities, schools, shelters. Places that make things, not just take them." She nodded, no surprise in her face. "That's what Ellen would have done," she said. "No," I replied gently. "That's what she taught me to do." "Let me ask you, if you finally reclaimed everything they stole from you, would you keep it or pass it on to those who needed it more?" I didn't tell anyone about the final transfer until it was done. One by one, I signed over the assets, properties, patents, and every last share of Bright Path Solutions. I met with a group of nonprofit leaders in a small conference room. No cameras, no fanfare. I handed them the keys and said, "Use this to build something good." One of them, a woman who ran a vocational school for veterans, looked at me with tears in her eyes. "This will change lives," she said. I nodded, but didn't smile. It wasn't about legacy. It was about repair. Not just of money or systems, but of something deeper: my own silence. For years, I had been complicit in the belief that family loyalty meant swallowing the cost, that fatherhood meant shielding your child even from himself. Ellen saw through that illusion long before I did. Her letters, written over late nights and hospital stays, told a different truth. Love isn't protecting someone from consequences. It's loving them enough to let them face them. Trevor hadn't called since the courtroom. I wasn't surprised. He needed time. I needed space. But 1 week later, I received a letter. Handwritten, no return address. I opened it slowly, expecting another threat. But it was from him. "Dad," it began, "I won't ask you to forgive me because I don't deserve it. I just want you to know I finally understand what you tried to teach me. Not with words, but with how you walked away. You could have destroyed me with noise. Instead, you did it with truth. And somehow I respect that more than I can admit out loud. I'm sorry for everything." I sat with that letter for a long time. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I did. I folded it carefully and placed it next to Ellen's notes. Maybe one day I'd write back. But today wasn't about fixing a broken son. It was about honoring the woman who saw through all of us, who stood quietly in the margins, but held the center together. I drove to the cemetery just before sunset, parking near the old oak tree that shaded Ellen's stone. The air was still, the sky streaked in gold and violet. I brought a single flower lilac, her favorite, and placed it beside her name. "It's done," I whispered. "The company, the lawsuit." Trevor told the truth. The wind moved through the branches as if responding. I took her photo from my coat, the one I carried through every confrontation, every dark hallway, every cold night. I set it down beside the flower. "You were right, Ellen, about everything." I stayed a while. I didn't say much more. I didn't need to. She already knew. On the drive home, I rolled down the window and let the wind pass through. No destination, no tension. Just space. Just peace. Let me ask you, if the person you loved most once asked you to be the bigger man, and you finally became him, would you feel pride, or would you just feel free? The house felt different now. Lighter. Like it had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. I moved through the rooms, slowly, not searching for anything, just reacquainting myself with the stillness. Ellen's chair by the window, the uneven floorboard in the hallway that always creaked at the wrong time, the kitchen where Trevor once spilled orange juice and cried like it was the end of the world. I paused in the study. The safe was still there, tucked behind a worn bookshelf. I opened it and removed the last copy of the report, the one I'd kept, just in case the world forgot how deep the lies ran. I stared at it for a long minute, then slid it into the shredder. The machine whirred quietly, devouring every line, every name, every number. It was no longer needed. The truth had already done its job. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the fireplace, letting the silence settle into my bones. For the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Clara called later that afternoon. "The foundation paperwork is complete," she said. "You're no longer the owner of Bright Path. You're now its benefactor." I smiled for the first time in a while. That sounds just about right. "There's one more thing," she added. "The press wants a quote, something for the closing piece." "Tell them this," I said. "I didn't build Bright Path to be a monument. I built it to be useful. If it can't do good, then it shouldn't exist. Now it finally can." Clara paused, then said, "You know, most people would have turned this into a victory lap." "I'm not most people," I said quietly. "I'm a man who got a second chance to finish something the right way." That evening I watched the sunset from the back porch. The sky turned the color of old paper, soft and golden. I held Ellen's last letter in my hand, not for comfort this time, but as a reminder of what truth costs and what it gives back. A car pulled into the driveway around 7. I stood cautious. It was Mark the journalist. He stepped out with a small package in hand. "Thought you'd want a copy," he said. "Print edition. Final story." I took it gently. The front page headline read, "Built on Integrity, Reclaimed by Truth, the Quiet Redemption of Henry Collins." I nodded, then handed it back. "You keep it," I said. "The story's yours now." He smiled. "What are you going to do next?" I looked toward the tree line where the last light was fading. "Nothing," I said. "And everything. Let me ask you, when your life has finally been cleared of all the noise, do you chase what's next? Or do you finally learn how to be still and let peace come to you?" A week passed without headlines. No more subpoenas, no more courtrooms, no more dark cars parked across the street. It was almost unsettling how quickly the world moved on once it had its story. But I didn't miss the noise. I welcomed the silence. I spent my mornings walking the trails behind the neighborhood, just me, the trees, and Ellen's memory, trailing softly behind. I'd nod to joggers, wave at kids on bikes, and keep moving. No one asked me about Bright Path. Maybe they didn't recognize me. Or maybe they did and simply respected the silence I'd chosen. One morning, while sorting old mail, I came across a letter from a school I hadn't heard of before. It was handwritten by a student. "Dear Mr. Collins," it read, "I don't know you, but I just wanted to say thank you. Because of the Bright Path grant, our classroom got new computers. My teacher says we're building apps now. I think I want to be someone like you when I grow up." I stared at the letter, my hands trembling. It had been years since I felt seen for something other than the company name. I folded it carefully and slipped it into Ellen's box next to the letters she left like a bridge between what was and what could be. That night, I visited the community center where part of the foundation's first donation had gone. I didn't introduce myself. I just sat in the back of the room as a group of single mothers learned bookkeeping on laptops the company once bought to impress investors. One of them clapped when she balanced her first spreadsheet. Her daughter, sitting beside her with a plastic juice cup, squealed with delight. That sound, that simple burst of joy, meant more than any award I ever had mounted in my office. As I left, One of the volunteers stopped me. "You're Mr. Collins, aren't you?" she asked, smiling gently. "The board told us what you did. We're really grateful." I nodded, unsure what to say. Then she added, "It's rare. When people get power back, they usually hold tighter. You let go." I walked back to my car in silence. Her words followed me home. That night, I sat in my armchair, the fire low, the house warm in its old, familiar way. I didn't need plans. I didn't need strategy. I just needed space. The phone buzzed once, an unknown number. I let it ring. I wasn't chasing closure anymore. I had it. I leaned back and let the quiet wrap around me. Before we begin the final chapter, I want to ask, if you finally rewrote the ending they tried to write for you, would you keep reading? Or would you close the book and start living the life you almost forgot you deserved? The letter came on a Saturday. No signature, no return address, just my name written in neat handwriting on the front. Inside was a single sheet. "He's in therapy," it read. "He started last week." I didn't think he would, but he did. "I thought you should know." There was no name, but I knew it was from Lisa. It didn't feel like a trick. It felt honest, like someone who'd finally let the mask slip. I placed the letter beside Ellen's in the box I kept near the fireplace, then closed the lid without ceremony. I didn't need to follow up. I didn't need to reach out. Trevor's healing was his own road to walk now, just as mine had been. I had walked mine slowly, one painful step at a time, through betrayal into truth, then through silence into peace. I didn't need applause at the end of it. I just needed to know I hadn't let what mattered most be buried under noise. That evening, I stood in the hallway and looked at a mirror I used to avoid. For the first time, I saw someone whole. Not the version of me that had been gutted by ambition, not the father defined by guilt, not the man erased by his own son, but the one who remained. The one who stayed. The one who rebuilt. Later that week, I met Clara for coffee. It wasn't legal business, just two old friends sitting in a booth with chipped mugs and strong, burnt coffee. "You look rested," she said. "It's strange," I replied. I didn't realize how heavy silence could be until it lifted. She smiled. "It wasn't silence, Henry. It was restraint. That's a different kind of strength." I nodded. Sometimes I wonder if Ellen planned all this I said. The letters, the foresight, like she knew this road would come, and left breadcrumbs. "She trusted you," Clara said gently. "Not to win, but to finish." I looked out the window where the morning sun lit up a kid on a bike wobbling between parked cars. It was quiet, unremarkable, and perfect. As I walked home, I passed the old tree where Ellen and I once carved our initials. They'd faded, but not disappeared. Time has a way of softening the edges without erasing the truth. I stopped, touched the bark, and whispered, "We did good." The wind picked up just enough to rustle the leaves like a response. When I got home, I lit one last fire. No paperwork, no plans, no speeches, just warmth, just peace. Let me ask you one last time, when everything you've lost is finally replaced by something quiet, steady, and honest. Would you go back to prove them wrong, or would you finally live like you've been right all along? We often think justice comes with thunder, with dramatic declarations and applause. But sometimes justice sounds like a door gently closing behind you as you walk away whole. I didn't win by taking back a company. I won by remembering who I was before they tried to erase me. And maybe that's the real lesson: we don't reclaim our worth through revenge. We do it through quiet resolve, through doing what's right even when no one claps. If you're a parent who's ever sacrificed everything only to be forgotten or betrayed, I hope this reminds you you were never invisible. You were just stronger than they realized. Have you ever lived through something like this? How did you respond when your silence was mistaken for weakness? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe and share. Some truths are worth passing on. Thank you for listening.